Assalamu alaikum. In the name of Allah, the beneficent, the merciful, I bear witness there is no God but He, and Muhammad is His servant. Sisters and brothers, I need to get right to it because I'm on the clock. I don't know if you got the email, which basically gave us an overview of what we were going to strive to do this evening. But our subject, as Brother Rodney alluded to, is the full scope of what has been revealed to the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, in 60 minutes. And that's quite a weighty assignment there. But this subject is in line with what Brother Rodney has been doing on these past few Wednesdays in dealing with our history and then sharing the perspective of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. As we know, this is Black History Month. Right. So we thought, what better subject to share in a meeting like this than the full scope of what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad revealed, because what was revealed to him is Black history. It's our history. It's not just Black history, but really it pertains to the entire human family. Black, brown, red, yellow, and white. Past, present, and future. So we thought we would make an attempt to cover this material for that reason, to be in line with what Brother Rodney has shared with us on these past few Wednesdays. But then also another purpose. In a study supplement that we sent out in December of 2007, we said that Brother Rodney had reminded us from Minister Farrakhan that the believers were going to be greatly tried on what we say we believe. And we cannot defend what we don't understand or cannot explain. Now, the more organized and systematized the teachings are in our minds, the better able we are to explain what we believe. So we must have this full scope of this teaching organized in our minds. Now, why should we do this? Well, greater organization brings about greater understanding. Greater understanding brings about greater energy for action. Greater knowledge and understanding produces greater love. And that's expressed in greater service or duty in the cause of Allah. And of course, Minister Farrakhan models this, and this is why he is premier in terms of love, study, and productivity. So that's the second purpose in what we're going to share this evening and why we're going to share the way we're going to share. So the way we're going to share this subject is one method of organizing material, and it's called mapping, making concept maps. So we're going to use this concept map that I prepared to go through the scope of what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has revealed. And what this will do by organizing what we've been given will allow us really to be able to learn more in less time.
All right. All right.
And all of us would love to have more time, but the reality is it seems like time is just shrinking away from us through all the responsibilities that we have. So if we maximize the organization of this material, we can do more in less time.
Yes, sir.
So now, when we talk about the full scope of what has been revealed, what do we mean by that? Let me define that up front so we have realistic expectations. When we talk about scope, we're talking about an extent, a range, a view, an area that's covered by a given activity or subject. It's a distance. If you look at this, you see a circle. And then inside the circle, you see orange coloring. Well, think of it like this. The scope would be like the outline of the circle. All of the detail and the information and the depth will be all of that that's inside the circle.
Right, right.
Now, would you agree that if we had paint, it would take less paint to draw the circle than it would to paint everything that's inside the circle?
That's right.
Would you agree?
Yes, sir.
See, so what we're going to do is we can't paint the whole circle, certainly in those 60 minutes.
60 seconds.
But what we're going to do is we're going to try to just paint the outline of it and give enough information so that you can see the broad scope, and then you can go after it as you would. Now, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said that he had gotten to the point to where he could cover this teaching, the scope of it, and to a depth that was appropriate for his purpose, which was a much deeper depth than what we're going to cover tonight, but he could do that in 6 hours. And if he took 6 hours, he could cover it all to a significant amount of depth for us. Then, in Message to the Black Man, if you start on the bottom of page 16 and go through to the end of that article, which ends on page 18, you have the Honorable Elijah Muhammad again given the full scope of this teaching in 13 paragraphs. And then, of course, Master Farrakhan Muhammad summed it up in 6 words: accept your own and be yourself.
Go ahead, Bob. So
you see, it's all about the amount of depth you're going to put into it. So today we're going to try to do 60 minutes worth. So it's going to be limited in depth, but we hope that it's valuable because it'll be a solid outline for us to go by. Okay?
Yes.
So what we're going to do is we have selected 14 critical, major, fundamental, we're going to call them reference points in the history, our history, as given to us by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So where does our history begin? I'm actually going to start in Holy Quran. Holy Quran, Surah 4, verse 1. It says, "O people, keep your duty to your Lord, who created you from a single being, and created its mate of the same kind, and spread from these two many men and women."
Yes.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan teach us that that single being, that single essence, is God himself. But now the question is, who is God? God who? Well, we can't go into the depth of that at this time, but if you if you will get Savior's Day, 1991, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan answers that in depth, thoroughly. The question of who is God in a way that anybody can understand and accept. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad in Our Savior Has Arrived, starting on pages, I think it's 61, starts off by saying, "Of all the knowledge that one may have or obtain, the knowledge of God is the greatest and the most necessary of all knowledge." Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
You would? Then he also says, however, that yet and still, many still want to claim that there is no such one as God. That all the creation just came by chance. That the human being just started off as something in the water, and then grew up out the water and grew and developed, and all of a sudden became a human being. But they were never able to prove such theories. So instead, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad says they just made up their own ideas about what God was, who God was. They didn't know.
Right.
So both those that believed and disbelieved in God, they just made up their own ideas about God without knowledge.
Right, right.
The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said there was a set time for God to be made known.
All right.
So that brings out 2 questions. Why? Why was there a set time for God to be made known? And when was that set time? Well, to answer the second question, the set time is now.
All right.
Can you prove it? Easy. Book of Revelation, 10th chapter, 7th verse. It says, in the last days, in the what days?
Last days.
The last days, the 7th angel will sound, and the mystery of God would be finished.
Yes, sir.
Well, what's a mystery? Mystery is something that's unknown.
That's right.
You don't know.
That's right.
Right.
So this thing, this being that's unknown, God, would be made known in the last days. The last days, not 2,000 years ago. Wasn't 4,000 years ago. Wasn't 8,000 years ago. Christians, Jews, Muslims, Buddhists, Native Americans, the Mayans, they all bear witness that we're living in the last days right now.
That's right.
So now is the time that we should expect for God to be made known and the mystery to be revealed.
Yes, sir.
Now, that all makes sense?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. I want to make sure I'm making sense, because that's important. Now, what we're going to do now is systematically go over, starting with one of the most difficult areas, but most important, because the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, God being made known today, said and taught and demonstrated that he met God in person. Now, before you just try to reject that and say, ain't no way he met no God, come on, man, for real. Before you try to reject that, let's look at what was revealed to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. Then you have to go back and look at his works. Then you got to look at the men that he produced, and especially the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. And if you can't dismiss Minister Farrakhan, And if you can't dismiss what was being revealed, well, then you can't just dismiss, oh, he didn't meet no God.
That's right.
Where did he get it from then?
Right.
So he said he met God in person. So let's look at what was revealed to the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the full scope of it. Let's start with Allah himself. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, well, we read in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, that's one beginning, but there's also another beginning. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that, oops, don't go ahead and quit on me now. Here we go. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that Allah is self-created. That in the very beginning, there was nothing but darkness. He calls it triple darkness. But yet and still there was material in the darkness, but because it was without aim and purpose, it was considered nothing. But then a light sparked in the darkness, and it began to gather around it 10,000 parts. And as it gathered, these 10,000 parts began to rotate. And as it began to rotate, it set up the basis for motion, which sets up the basis for time, and it also set up the basis for mathematics. Because as it moved and rotated, it began to make movements, producing a 1, and then a 6, and then going around in a 0. And he said this was the beginning. And so he built himself up in the darkness, but there was no one there to record the time when it took place. Because God Elijah Muhammad said it took time for him to build up brains. And what bears witness to his beginning is our beginning. In the womb of our mothers. How did we begin? Triple darkness.
Right.
I don't know if you've ever been in that kind of a situation. Well, we all were, that's how we got here. The closest I've gotten to experiencing that, and that's not a word, to have that experience again is being in an actual cave. If you've ever been in an actual cave and you go down into the caverns and they cut the lights, oh, you're not seeing nothing. No. You're right here doing this. You're not seeing nothing. It's total blackness. Right. So that's our beginning. And as we grow and develop, we form a clock, we circle up, we move around, we make revolutions, and then we grow and develop, and then brains are developed. So it was with Allah's self-creation. At a certain point, he built up brains, and then we could begin to record the history and the time, consciously. So a great deal, we're talking, of time took place, and it was also a great deal of pain.
Right.
Great deal of time, great deal of pain. So once he created himself with needs, but then he also created himself with the ability to satisfy his needs. Two things that he wanted: comfort and companionship. And so the first thing that he did is he looked at himself, studied himself, and brought out of himself that which would be satisfying his need, and he brought forth the woman. That was Allah's first creation after himself, was the woman. Comfort, consolation, and then also a means by which he could reproduce himself on down the lines of history for infinity. And the woman, as the Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us, is our heaven.
That's right.
Think about that. As my brother JABRIL likes to say, brother, you don't die and go to heaven. You get married and you hug heaven.
Hug heaven.
That's how that goes.
Go ahead.
You're looking for some kind of heaven beyond that. There's not one to be. It's not there. So that's the woman. Next up, after these two marvelous creations, comes the sun. And also the stars and the planets. Now, sun, huge ball of fire. But it didn't start off like that. It started off small and grew to its present size and then stopped. So it grew to a size of a diameter of 853,000 miles, over 2.5 million miles in circumference, 14,000, no 172 degrees hot. Huge ball of fire that supplies us, the universe, with light, warmth, heat, and because it's the source of light, it is the source of our eyesight. A lot of people think you can still see in the dark. No, you can't. You cannot see if you're in true darkness, like that cave example. If you were complete and utter darkness, you see nothing physical. So the sun provides the universe with what I just mentioned: light, heat, warmth, life, all of that in the physical universe. And it also provides us with vitamins, so Jesus and Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And if you want to read more about that, you can get this little book, The Flag of Islam, because the sun forms the base and the background of the flag that was given to us by Master Farrakhan Muhammad.
Right.
Then you have the stars now. You have God creating the sun just with the power of his mind. Then he and the woman, they producing children, men and women. How long? I don't know. But then these men that are produced, they begin to produce stars. Again, using the power of their minds. Producing planets with the power of their minds. So that brings out two questions for me. What kind of men were these? That you can think up sun and produce it. Think up stars and produce it. Planets and produce it. But then it also brings out the question, what kind of women were these? That could produce children, nurture them, cultivate them, grow them, teach them, educate them, so that they could grow up to be able to do it. The woman is not lightweight. Not at all.
Right.
We're taught that she's the second self of God. She's a God herself. So then we have sun, stars, planets. Then we come to a very interesting time in our history, 66 trillion years ago, where we have the making of the moon. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us 66 trillion years ago that the moon was a part of the earth. And that one of our scientists, or we say a god, who became dissatisfied, he had a program he was trying to get over. He wasn't successful in getting that program over. He was trying to get everybody to speak the same dialect, was unable to do so. He got frustrated and flipped out. Have some of us done that?
Right.
We've had something we've been trying to do and we can't get it over, we flip out. Well, when you flip out and you got that kind of mind and power, what can you do? So we said, man, I was going to kill everybody. So we're talking, drilled a hole, filled it with dynamite, set it off. But he was unsuccessful in killing everybody. He blew off that part that is called moon, blew it off about 12,000 miles. The earth dropped from its orbit 36,000 miles. All the water that was on that part fell onto this part. It took 6 years for that water to fall onto this part. If you were on that part that is now moon, you was just dead. But if you were on the other side of the earth, you didn't feel nothing. You was going about your business. That's how huge this earth is. For an explosion like that to take place, kill some, the others not even know what's going on. And that's the origin of the moon. And the Caucasian has gone to the moon and borne witness when he went up there, pulled back samples and said, man, it smells like gunpowder.
Yes, sir.
And then they studied the materials, the same materials as there are in the earth. Then we're taught that after that point in time is when God, the Supreme Being, decided to hide himself from the public. So he hid himself. And only those that knew him were the 12, and Elijah Muhammad says, major scientists. Well, what's that all about? Well, if you read the book of Revelations, you read about 24 elders in the book of Revelations. Now, Elijah Muhammad said these are those scientists. He taught us that, among other things, in addition to producing planets, sun, moon, stars, and all of that, he said these scientists are able to tune into the thinking of the minds of the people. And based on what people are thinking, look at actions that they're going to engage in and be able to write the history in advance.
Yes.
And prior to the making of the moon, it was done in 35,000 year cycles.
Think over that.
But then once the moon was blasted away, it shrunk our circumference to 25,000 miles. So we make history to equal our circumference a year to every mile. Right. So you have 25,000 years of history that are written by these scientists. You can read about them again, Revelations 4, 5, and I think 6. And you also can read of them in the Holy Quran. They're called the Exalted Assembly. I think that's in, I wrote that down somewhere. I have to get that back to you. I think it's Surah 37. Surah 37, verse 8. The exalted assembly. And so, these, again, are men. What kind of men were these? And again, what kind of women were these that produced these kind of men? To be able to look into the future 25,000 years and write the history in advance. So we have the making of moon. Now, from 66 trillion years ago, all the way to 50,000 years ago, we don't know, we weren't told anything. We weren't told anything about what took place from 66 trillion to 50,000 years ago. But, needless to say, men that had these kind of minds, women that had these kind of minds, whatever they were doing during that time period, I bet they was jamming. They were just sitting around doing nothing, twiddling their thumbs. So whatever they were doing, I bet they was jamming. You know, for example, I just don't believe the white folks were the first to know how to fly.
That's right.
Now we think the Wright brothers, they created flight, and they were the first ones to produce an airplane. Well, yeah, our fathers were able to produce the universe. You don't think they figured out a way to fly? Come on. So whatever they were doing during that time period, we weren't given that knowledge of it. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said, touching on that, said that one of the reasons that we don't know a lot of that history, because the more that would be revealed, the more the enemy could use and hang on to his power.
Right, right.
So what we were given is limited, but it's enough
Right.
for what we got to do.
That's right.
So 50,000 years ago, we come to one of our scientists again by the name of Shabazz.
Okay.
And Shabazz is you could say the father of the tribe of Shabazz, of which we are all members.
Yeah.
Having been the descendants of a people who were brought from Africa into America into slavery. This also includes those who were brought to the West Indies and whatnot. So all of those are that particular tribe. And so Shabazz again was a scientist who took a part of his family into Africa because he said he wanted to make a tough people. He didn't get agreement on that, but he went and did it anyway. And this was done 50,000 years ago. Now, one thing that I didn't mention, this is something that shows up, I'm going to say it like this and then explain it. It doesn't show up in this Quran, nor does it show up in the last Quran, but it shows up in 3 Qurans ago. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let me show you. This is going to take a quick second. Let me just show you on the screen what we mean by it. If we just got through saying that the history is written for 25,000 years. I know you can't see all of this, and it's not necessarily important that you can see all of it, but I'm just going to try to make a point. The history is written for 25,000 years, correct? According to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. So right now, where are we in the history? Each 25,000 year period can be called a Quran. Okay? In that reference that not that one maybe, but in Surah 43, verses 1 through 4. Surah 43, verses 1 through 4. Remember I mentioned that exalted assembly?
Yes.
Well, in those verses it talks about the Quran, the Holy Quran, is revealed in Arabic, but it belongs to a mother of the books, to an original book that is safe, some translations say, safe with us. Who's the us? The exalted assembly. So every so often they reveal a piece of it, and it comes out that the whole of it, also called Quran, is safe with us. So the whole 25,000 years, if we look at this right here, let me zoom out just a little. All the way on the left will be year 1. I know it's hard to see this thing is moving around. You see the little mouse moving around? That's year 1. All the way on the other end will be year 25,000. Right now, we are in the year 2009, which corresponds to 15,000, the year 15,095. Okay?
Right.
So we back up to year 1, that's year 1. What happened before year 1? 15,000 years ago takes us to year 1, correct? Well, if If we go back, say, another 1,000 years, and we'll get to this in a second, 15,000 plus 1,000 is 16,000, right? Well, 16,000 years ago, we'll talk about this in a second, is when the Indians were exiled. You see that? But that's also in the year 24,000 of that Quran. You follow me?
Right, right.
Then if you go 19,000 years prior to that, exactly, you get to 35,000 years ago. All right? Because you got 15 takes us to 1, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. 35,000 years ago is when Buddhism popped up. Got so bad 19,000 years later, the Indians got put out. F time. North America. Okay? Then, that's the year 5,000 of that Quran. So then we go, that's 35, 35, 40. Go back to the next Quran, 40. 45, 50,000 years ago. That's 3 Qurans. And that's when Shabazz did his work. And if you notice down here, we were taught by our Elijah Muhammad that every 50,000 years, you have a universal change. Where there's an appearance of a red and a blue star signifying universal change. And that happened 50,000 years ago when Shabazz produced us, produced the tribe of Shabazz. And we were taught that some scientists could see further than others. Some could see beyond 25,000 years. And so the question that arises when you look at the work of Shabazz and the way he produced us, he wanted to produce a tough people. A people who would be close to nature, but they could conquer the jungles of Africa. Could he see all the way to what would take place with our sojourn in America through slavery? That's a valid question. The evidence seems to show that that's more than likely possibly what he saw. And maybe what the others didn't see. And which is why he went about making us as tough as we did.
Go ahead.
With the nappy head, but it's like a sponge, so it holds water. Plus it can take the blows.
Oh, yeah.
Flare the nostrils so you can get that air when you need it.
Teach on the guard.
All that.
Go ahead.
Tough skin.
Go ahead.
You can handle that sunlight.
That's-
You're going to be out in it.
That's right.
A lot.
Come on.
And the heat. Work it. You got a whole bunch of them.
Yes.
Tough skin. Tough people.
Right,
And
right.
only the strongest of the strongest survive.
That's right.
And that's where we come from.
Yes, sir.
That's where we come from.
Law.
So now, I hope I tried to make that clear when I say the different Qurans. So now, we're dealing with Shabazz. And as we just said, we had Buddhism that pops up 35,000 years ago. Then it got, and let me just say this. The Buddhism of 35,000 years ago is not necessarily the Buddhism that's practiced today. What this is referring to is the popping up of the worship of idol gods. Just worshiping any old thing as God. And then it got so bad that we're taught by our Elijah Muhammad that when you had the continual breaking of the law of Islam was when the Indians got put out. And just to show you, if you hadn't looked at this, I know that's tough to see. But can you see right here, which is India? This is where they were exiled from. Can you see over here where it says United States?
Yes, sir.
Okay, well they were driven. They were driven up through here, over the Bering Straits into North America. Okay?
Yes, sir.
So I think it's helpful sometimes to actually be able to see, you know, what took place and where it took place to see, hey, this is our history. But I don't want to say too much on that, simply because we're taught that the Indians, they us. They're with us. This is the time of their redemption, just like it's our time. We're to be redeemed together in this time. Now, still with me?
Yes, sir.
I know sometimes it's hard to follow this kind of a presentation. Hopefully, it's not too hot anyway.
Yes, sir.
Praise be to the Lord. All right, now we turn the corner. I think we made a good time. We turn the corner. 29 minutes, 38 seconds. Doing all right. So now we turn the corner from the Indians being exiled, and we come to this fella here. Yakub. Now you need quite a bit of time to really get into the depth of this, but I'm just going to say this. Yakub is the father of the races, but in particular, he's the father of the I always have a hard time saying it. Adamic race of people, or the Caucasian. Now you hear the scholars now, they talk in terms of the Pre-Adamites, and you got the Adamites, right? Well, who's the Pre-Adamites? It's y'all. Who are the Adamites? That's the Caucasian. And they just continue over the years to bear witness to the truth that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught. One example of that is this book right here, called The Story of Mankind by Heinrich Wilhelm von Loon. And I'm just going to read just a little piece out the book from page 17, and it says, these earliest ancestors of ours, he's talking about his people, who lived in the great European wilderness. Oh, before I say that, let me say this. No, I'll read it, then I'll say it. Were rapidly learning many new things. It is safe to say that in due course of time, they would have given up the ways of savages and would have developed a civilization of their own. But suddenly there came an end to their isolation. They were discovered. A traveler from an unknown southland who had dared to cross the sea and the high mountain passes had found his way to the wild people of the European continent. He came from Africa. His home was in Egypt. And we shall therefore leave our great-grandfathers in their caves while we visit the southern and eastern shores of the Mediterranean, where stood the earliest school of the human race. And he also says that the valley of the Nile had developed a high stage of civilization thousands of years before the people of the West had dreamed of the possibilities of a fork, or a wheel, or a house. Now, I don't share this to make no kind of mockery. All right? I don't do that at all. But it's important that we know the truth and that we handle the truth properly. So Yakub is the father of the races. We had trillions of years where there wasn't nobody on the planet but black people. Nobody in the universe but black people. Okay? Now all of a sudden you got races. Races don't just pop up. It's like if all you had is red, dark red flowers, roses, and that's all you had. You're not all of a sudden going to produce a whole bed of white flowers, roses. You might produce one here and there, and we did produce very light skins here and there, called albinos. But you don't produce no race of a white people, of a brown people, of a yellow people. Just like you don't produce no whole flower bed of white roses out of red unless you go through a process and graft it out. You got to go into the DNA of that thing and pull it out, and then you can produce the various colors, and that's what Yakub did. That's what he did. And we say that, by the very fact that white people exist shows that they had to come through a process. So what is that process? Well, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad shares that process with us, and you can read more about it if you get Message to the Black Man, read pages 100 to 134, and we can go into depth on that, which we don't have time to do today. But that's how they got here. And once they were produced, it started off with, I'm going to show you this too. I'm going to show you.
Go ahead, teach God.
It was done on an island called Pilan, or Patmos. Would you like to see it?
Yes, sir.
So let's look. Come on, computer, don't trip on me down. All right, here is Patmos. Now, to give it more context, we could zoom out. Not in, but out. We'll zoom in a minute. If we begin to zoom out, things come into perspective. It's right there where A is, and here we have Greece. Athens is right here. Remember the Olympics a few years ago? Here we have Turkey. Here we have Syria. Here we have Italy. Here we have Sicily. Zoom out. Here we have Egypt, Libya, Saudi Arabia. Yaqub did his teaching in and around Mecca. That's where he pulled his 59,999 followers, hopped over to his island and got busy doing the work. First producing in the first 200 years a brown race of people, the Japanese. Then another 200 years, a yellow group of people, race of people, the Chinese. And finally, after 600 years, produced the Caucasian race. That's just historical, scientific, anthropological fact.
Right.
Okay? Now, if we zoom in, zoom, zoom. And then turn it to terrain, no, satellite. No. We can zoom. Pull it over a little bit. Pull it over a little bit. Zoom. Zoom. And here you can actually see some of the hospitals that were used. You can't see that ain't there. But you can see the land. It's there. It exists. That's the island. That's where the work was done. You can Google Earth it. You can Google Map it. Check it out. And you can see the location of this great work. And it is a great work. If the work was not done, we would be in a position to be in where we are right now to get the great blessing that's on the way. It sounds like a paradox, but it's the truth. It's the truth. All right, so let me get off of that. And now, move on to the last few critical points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more critical points, and we can go through them, I believe, fairly quickly. Now, the next critical point we want to deal with, because again, it goes right back to what I just said, is Abraham. Abraham. You got to include Abraham in this scope of what we've been talking. And particularly, you got to look at the 15th chapter of Abraham, because in that chapter, Abraham now is considered the father of the righteous. He's the father of the 3 monotheistic religions. That's right. Judaism, Islam, Christianity. All claim him as the father. But God made a promise to this father. And he told Abraham, if you read it in chapter 15, he said, look now, Abraham, you're going to have a seed that's just so plenty. It's going to be like the stars in the sky, like the sands on the beach. Abraham was like, well, how's this thing going to happen? How's my seed going to inherit it? And God put on Abraham a deep sleep, a deep darkness on him. And he put Abraham in the mindset of what we were going to have to go through. And he said, your seed, Abraham, is going to be a stranger in a strange land that is not their own, and they're going to suffer for 400 years. And he said, and if you read it, it says a dark horror came upon Abraham. The mindset that God put him in, so that he could kind of relate and empathize what we were going to go through for those 400 years. But then he said, after that time, I will come, deliver them, judge those whom they have served, and they're going to come out with great substance. That's the promise that was given to Abraham. And you got some folks claiming that promise, but they don't fulfill what took place.
Right.
Now, you can talk about those 400 years, but, you know, for real, if you read from Genesis all the way to Exodus, you don't find no 400, there ain't no 400 years there for the so-called Jews to have fulfilled that. And now you got more and more Jews, they writing books, bearing witness to that. Yes, Jewish writers writing books, so the Jewish bookstores saying, you know, we didn't do that. Right. Years ago, in either the late 60s or the 70s, you had Walter Cronkite talking with Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat in Egypt. And Menachem Begin was saying, you know, it's interesting basically that we hear, you know, in Egypt at the pyramids where my people served, you know, slaves. And Anwar Sadat said, hold on, whoa. Ain't no history of that. Ain't no history of that in Egypt. You know, in Egypt got their history down pat. It never happened. It never happened. The only people that fulfill that is you and I. We fulfill that. So that's a huge study that we ought to take time to look into, because it's a great promise that's being fulfilled right now as we speak. And then we come to Moses. We just touched on him. That stranger, that traveler that came to the west. The real work of the historic Moses was that work of delivering the Caucasian from the caves. During the time of Abraham, Abraham came in the year 10,000. The Caucasian, his making was completed in the year 9,000. He made trouble in Arabia and he got driven to Europe, where he went into the caves for 2,000 years. So while the Caucasian was still in the caves, Abraham was doing his work in Arabia. While the Caucasian was still in the cave. And it wasn't until later, in the year 1100, 2,000 years after the Caucasian was in the caves, that Moses came to them, as is borne witness to in this book, and taught them how to live, taught them how to cook food, taught them all that he needed to know to be able to be a respectful member of, we say, the human family. And to get on his job, which was to rule for 6,000 years. 2,000 years were lost, but he's been jamming every last 4,000, straight up. So then we have Moses. Historic Moses did that work. But I think that there's a distinction that needs to be made between the work of the historic Moses and the work of the one that's described in the book of Deuteronomy, where God says to Moses that I'm going to raise up from among them a man like you, Moses. And I will speak my word. I will put my words in his mouth. Whereas the minister points out, you don't need a man like Moses unless you got people that's in that situation that's written of in the Bible. And if it didn't take place 4,000 years ago, then when did it take place?
Good question.
Or is it taking place now?
Yes,
Come on.
If it's taking place now, who is that man like Moses?
Come on, come on, come on.
Now, we come to Esau, or Jesus. And let me say this about Moses. We honor, we accept, we thank Allah for Moses and for the scripture that he brought called Torah.
Right.
We thank God, Allah, for Jesus, the Messiah, the exalted Christ.
Right, that's right.
And we accept and honor and respect the gospel.
Yes.
Right.
However, there's a distinction, again, that needs to be made. The scholars of today, the scholars of Christianity. Now, regardless of what we know as black people, whatever we know as black people about Christianity, we got it from white people. We got it from white scholars. And they taught us what to teach. That's just the reality. And so we took it and ran with it, and only recently or now we get into seminaries, but still they controlling that. They still controlling that. But now they are raising the question of the distinction between the historical Jesus and the prophetic Jesus. And now they're saying that only a very small percentage of the words that are attributed to Jesus in the Bible were actually spoke by the man 2,000 years ago.
Come on.
They're saying this. They bear witness to it. And so the Honorable Elijah Muhammad gave us the true history of Jesus, whose name was Esau.
Right.
And again, I don't have time to get into it, but if you get this little book or a book like it, The True History of Jesus, you can find out about this man who did in fact live, he did in fact work in Palestine, and he did a great work.
Right.
But the bulk of what you read about Jesus, the Messiah, the exalted Christ, didn't happen no 2,000 years ago. It's to happen in the last days.
Right.
So now is the time to be looking for the Jesus. Now is the time to be looking for the Messiah. Now is the time to be looking for the work that's being done by the Jesus. Now is the time for that. Our problem is we've been looking backwards, thinking we have a true grasp of the reality, but we are out of phase. And when you're out of phase, you just don't see it right. You got to bring everything into phase. It's almost like a combination line. You got to get the numbers right together, and then once you get everything together, then you're able to unlock it.
Right. Right.
And that's the way the scriptures are. So now, good time. After Jesus, the next important study of this scope Prophet Muhammad.
Right.
And as Muslim followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, under the direction and leadership of the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, we love and honor Prophet Muhammad. Peace be upon him. And we honor and love the Holy Quran.
Right.
And we honor and love the Arabs for keeping the Quran pure and holy.
That's correct.
However, there's a distinction that needs to be made between Muhammad ibn Abdullah of 1400 years ago
Go ahead.
and the Muhammad that is to be the ultimate recipient of this book, Quran.
Right.
I
Right.
said, brother, where you get that from?
Uh-huh.
Hey, if you look at Holy Quran 28 and 46, 32 and 3, 36 and 6, it's very clear. I'll read one of them to you. I'm not going to read all three, but I'm just going to pick one of them. I think I'll pick 36 is what I just opened up to. So I'm going to pick 36 and 6. And it says, I'll go to 5 first, and I'll go to 4 first. No, I'm going to go to 3 first. No, I'm going to go to 2 first. It says 2. By the Quran, full of wisdom, surely thou art one of the messengers. So Allah is talking to a messenger. He's talking to a messenger. Surely thou art one of the messengers on a right way, a revelation from the mighty, the merciful, that thou may warn a people whose fathers were not warned, so they are heathens. What? The scholars say, well, that's Prophet Muhammad. Couldn't be. Couldn't be. Because Prophet Muhammad worked in Arabia. We just said Abraham taught in Arabia. They had plenty of prophets in Arabia. They handled plenty of business. But there's only one place on earth where this makes sense and where it could be fulfilled, and that's right here in the United States. So just like you got to ask the question, well, who is the Moses? Who is the Jesus? You got to ask the question, who is the Muhammad? Then Honorable Elijah Muhammad says that Allah gave to him 2/3 of this book to study, and then 1/3 was for another man. Who is that?
Come on.
That's a question you got to deal with.
Right.
Moses made a prayer. And he prayed to Allah. You can read about it in the 20th surah of the Holy Quran. And he said, I pray to Allah. He said, I pray for an aider. He wanted to help him.
Right.
Elijah Muhammad said the same thing in 1954. Save this day. He said, we have been so greatly misunderstood that I desired Allah sent me a little special helper. Something along that, if I paraphrase.
Right.
A year later, Mr. Farrakhan came through the door.
That's right.
Now, that's just something to study. We can't prove everything right this minute. But we just want to give you something to look at and feed on and go back and study and deal with, because you got to deal with this sooner or later. It'd be better for us if we deal with it sooner. So now, and also, in dealing with this Moses, this Jesus, this Muhammad, and the ultimate fulfillment of these figures, you will be wise to read Message to the Black Man, pages 157, page what?
157.
157, go ahead.
157, 186, 248, and 286. These are 4 articles written by the Honorable Elijah Muhammad where he is showing you, he's proving his identity in accordance with the time.
Yes.
We'll be wise to study those 4 articles, and we can't get into all that information today, but it all leads up to, as we said at the beginning, and said a few minutes ago, when talking about the people that Yaqub produced, they were given 6,000 years to rule. They were completed in the year 9,000. Add 6 to that, you get the year 15,000, and that corresponds to the year what? To the year what? 1914. So now we have 1914. That's the time is up. You say, well, the time is up, man. It's 2009. What's going on? When Elijah Muhammad said we were given an extension, he was given an extension of time because of Mark, and he did such a thorough job on us, brothers and sisters. He did a real good job on us now, so we couldn't just turn it all over.
Right.
Then we had to be worked into a position and into a condition where we would be acceptable to Allah. And that has been going on now since that time. And so that leads us to, I'll say the punchline, but it's not a joke, but it leads us to the last point.
Right.
Master Farrakhan Muhammad. This is the man that taught me on the way Elijah Muhammad. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad said Allah came to him in person. Master Farrakhan Muhammad, and taught him, and we just gave some of the scope of it, but there's much more in depth there. You can really just deal with the actual facts.
Right.
And the measurements that are given in the lessons with regard to the universe, and just deal with that. Because if you do a study of the encyclopedias that are produced by the Caucasians over the years, and you go back into the early 1900s or whatnot, and you look at their figures for what measures what the different planets' measurements are and their distances, you look at the actual facts, which never changed.
That's right. That's right.
Revealed in 1930.
That's right.
And you look at the encyclopedias, and their numbers change. And their numbers change until they're closer and closer and closer and closer to the actual facts we were given by Master Farrakhan Muhammad. He said there was life on 7 of the 9 planets. I said, oh, come on, man, that's crazy. But now what are the scientists saying now? They peeping up in Mars, they, hey, man, there's some water up
That's
here.
right.
Right.
I'm going to just read this real quick about Master Farrakhan Muhammad. This is an article and message to the black man. The one that I mentioned is, I can't read it all because I don't have time, but I just want to give you a little taste of how the Honorable Elijah Muhammad approaches giving us a quick synopsis. This was written in a magazine in 1956. A Pakistani brother owned a magazine by the name of The Muslim World. And he loved the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He asked him to put a statement in his paper. And so at the bottom of page 16, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad writes, Allah came to us from the holy city Mecca, Arabia in 1930. He used the name Wallace D. Farrar, often signing it W.D. Farrar. In the third year, 1933, he signed his name W.F. Muhammad, which stands for Wallace Farrar Muhammad. He came alone. He began teaching us the knowledge of ourselves, of God, of the devil, of the measurement, of the earth, of the planets, and of the civilization of some of the planets other than Earth.
Right.
He measured and weighed the earth and its water. The history of the moon, the history of the two nations, black and white, that dominate the earth. He gave the exact birth of the white race and the name of their God who made them and how. Then the end of their time, the judgment, how it will begin and end. He taught us the truth of how we were made slaves and how we are kept in slavery by the slave master's children. He declared the doom of America for her evils to us was past due, and that she is number one to be destroyed. Her judgment could not take place until we hear truth. He declared that we were without the knowledge of self or anyone else, how we had been made blind, deaf, and dumb by this white race of people, and how we must return to the people, our God, his religion of peace, Islam, the religion of the prophets. We must give up the slave names of our slave masters and accept the name of Allah God, or one of his divine attributes. He also taught us to give up all evil doings and practices and do righteousness or be destroyed from the face of the earth. He taught us that the slave master had taught us to eat the wrong food, and that this wrong food is the cause of our sickness. He declared he would heal us and set us in heaven at once. Then I'm going to skip down here to where it says, he pointed out a destructive, dreadful-looking plane that is made like a wheel in the sky today. You heard about these UFOs?
Yes, sir.
Everybody, we getting out there now, brother. Talking about UFOs, man. Come on, man. Hey, they being seen all over the planet.
Right.
The country of France, the home of the birth home of my mother. They done opened up the books and said, man, look, this is what's going on. In England, they done opened the books and, man, this is what's going on. In Mexico, they look, man, this is what's going on. It's only in America they trying to, it's like you breaking 12 eggs and trying to just hold them all in your hand. You just can't do it. You just can't do it. So he said, this wheel is a half a mile by a half a mile.
Take your time, huh?
It's a humanly built planet.
That's right.
Now just get in your car and drive for half a mile. That's huge. You say, no, it can't be. It can't be.
Go by half mile.
Ezekiel saw it a long time ago. Read your Bible. Read it. It's reality now. It was built for the purpose of destroying the present world. He also hinted at plaguing the world with rain, snow, hail, and earthquakes. You watch the Weather Channel today?
That's right.
Did you hear about the softball size hail?
That's right.
Did you hear about it? Did you see them tornadoes ripping up the country?
That's right.
All right.
All right.
There's more to come. He spoke with authority, not as one who was under authority, but one who is independent.
Think that over.
He said the world's time was out in 1914, but the extension, as we talked about, was, you know, they got an extension. If they treat us right, they get, you know, a little extra juice for that, a little extra time for that. But you should read the rest. I'm not going to read more because two more things I want to share. But you ought to read that. You ought to read that. So, we have Master Farrakhan Muhammad. And of course, y'all don't like this, I think. The time of universal change, and he had Muhammad Muhammad. Like that picture? I see y'all faces. Where you get that picture from? Where you get that picture from? Can you have it? No.
Come on.
I don't have permission to share. That's a nice picture though, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
And it's legit. I had it confirmed.
Come on.
But y'all Elijah Muhammad.
This is your message.
You gotta study Elijah Muhammad. You gotta study his history. You gotta study his word. You gotta study his works. And as we said, Moses had an Aaron. Jesus had Peter and Paul.
Go ahead.
Elijah Muhammad said that 2/3 of this book was for him and the other third was for another man. We need to ask the question, who's that man? And Elijah Muhammad said of his mouth, he said, this mouth is not made to speak idle words. So let's listen to the words of Elijah Muhammad very quickly about this man, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. Yeah, we can go home. Everybody all right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. I have to make a switch. Yes, I did. I have to switch this cord.
It's all right.
Go ahead, Bob. Come here.
We trying to switch.
All right.
It's all right.
I want you to remember today I have one of my greatest teachers here, going over
July the 30th, 1972, during the Theology at Time lecture series, Chicago, Illinois, Temple number 2. So I think it appropriate that we close on that and saying of Minister Farrakhan that regardless of who we are, our race, our station in life, we owe it to ourselves to make a thorough study of the man that's right in front of our face. We don't see Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we don't see Master Farrakhan, but we see Minister Farrakhan, who represents them both. Represents them both in terms of their words and their works. We owe it to ourselves to analyze the minister, his words, his actions, his deeds, and most importantly, his heart and his motive. And then take the proper attitude with regards to him and the proper actions with regards to him. Because if we don't, I'll just say it, the advice that was given by the, I forgot what his position was in the book of Acts, 5th chapter, 39th verse, his name was Gamaliel, I believe. And he was trying to warn his people. And he was saying, oh, now look now. He said, if this be the work of man, then, it's going to go to naught. He said, however, if this be of God, and then we oppose it, we're fighting against God.
That's right.
So we would be wise to study this and take the proper attitude and actions so that we can be in unity with God and not working against God, against his servant, and really against our own doggone self.
That's right.
So with that, brothers and sisters, I thank you for your time and your patience. I give you some peace. Assalamu alaikum. And at this time, I'd like to bring back to the rostrum our brother who represents the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan in the city of Philadelphia and throughout the entire Delaware Valley region, and does a wonderful job in doing so.
Right.
Please receive him at this time, Brother Minister Rodney Muhammad.
Let's give it up again for Brother Bobby. This is Brother Ricker. All praise is due to Allah. I mean, I hope that the visuals and what he shared and the way it was organized, that it can help you explain what you come for.
Right, right.
Because that's what was important to him. He discussed that with me. And, when a person is really trying to make sure that you understand it, you can tell. They put a lot into this so that you can understand it, because his brother's feeling, if you can explain it, more than likely you can defend it.
Yes, sir.
But if you can't explain it, then more than likely you will not be able to defend it.
Right.
And as he said, the inability to defend it could cost us. It could prove fatal because it's connected with our understanding of it. So, don't devalue study. Last night, they had a dialogue session at City Hall, and the circles were set up, and they did a dialogue thing. I can tell you from what I've heard coming from many of you in the study circles over the past 14, 15 months, you would be surprised how you sound next to people that I saw that are in pulpits and that who still don't really have a clue. And they have a Bible. And they were less scriptural. They were not able to read into the time that we were in. They really have hope in this world. But believe Jesus is the door to lead you out of this world into the next one. So don't devalue the study of these great men. In time you study the man, as he said. So, with that said, let me, we have an important webcast for the registered Muslims on Friday night before our Savior's Day coming, and we'd like us all to be here. Also, if you have time, you want to stop down, we'll be at Freedom Theater from 1 p.m. to 7 p.m. on Saturday, and we're preparing some presentations, but we're just retracing some of the steps of the Honorable Louis Farrakhan and retracing the work, this magnificent work of rebuilding the work of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And it really is tied into that the nation of Islam would fall, but it would rise again, never to fall. And it had to fall because to pass the baton to Minister Louis Farrakhan, people would never have given their real love and loyalty to him after the other man had brought them up out of the grave. And so Allah, in his infinite wisdom, knew that the way to get them, the nation would go down. The only way he could call the nation back is that Allah was with him. And it was the strength of his connection with Allah that I was able to climb up, and many others, and stand up on his faith to get strong in this work of the rebuilding. So, you know, keep on studying, and when you can come on out and be with us and keep that up. But Saturday, we're going to be down there all day. We got many voices from the community coming to talk. We got some health screenings. Some of us need to get some health screenings and look at our health. But we got to take responsibility for ourselves, and that starts with taking responsibility for your body and your mind. And the first instruction that you receive as an FOI and MGT is eat 1 meal a day. Fast 3 days out of every month. These were some of the earlier instructions and practices that should not be deleted from our life pattern, barring some special situation. But taking responsibility for our body and our health, and taking responsibility for feeding our minds. You know, a lot of us have gone back to allowing just anything to get up here. We don't want to eat junk food for our regular digestive system. We got to stop taking in junk food. It's stripping us of our spiritual health. All right, and if we're going to be a model for others, then you're going to see that in order to get others to turn their homes into learning institutions, because this society is breaking down, it would not recover. Okay, so the Honorable Louis Farrakhan is already laying out and making provisions for us to go through the door. But as he said, many of us are stuck in the middle of the door. We're not too sure whether we want to go in or not. If you're sure about this world, the way we saw people last night, that was not, I could really see that we have something valuable here, okay? So that we're going to pass the receptacle. We're going to ask us all to reach out and put $5 in, or $10 in tonight and help. And let's thank Allah that he put it in brother's heart to give us that wonderful presentation tonight.